Hello, I'm Owen Dell. I'm a local landscape architect in Corvallis, and I'm a member of the Willamette Valley Regenerative Landscape Coalition, which is partnering with the Benton Soil and Water Conservation District to bring you a series of videos on garden water management. What I'd like to talk to you about today is a couple tricks on water management that I find really helpful and that I think will save you effort and water and even money. So let's go over here and take a look at this flower bed. We're at my house, and this is out in the front parkway. And I want to talk to you about how to know when to water. And what we have found is that it's very easy for most people to overwater, including myself. The reasons for that are not very complex, and the solution is not very complex. When you look at a spot like this, if you look down at the ground, you'll see that it looks pretty dry. And you might say, well, this is a hot day and the ground looks dry and maybe it's time for me to water. But that's not necessarily the case. So first of all, what we need to know is that our soils here in the valley actually hold water pretty well. The need to water is not really that frequent. How do you find out? Well, looking at the surface of the soil is obviously not adequate. What you need to do is go down underground, under the mulch, under the surface of the soil, where the roots are, and see what's going on down there. So one of the tricks for that is to use a moisture meter. Now you can buy moisture meters at any garden center or nursery. This happens to be a professional model, so it's a little more expensive, it's a lot more accurate, and it's mainly a lot more sturdy than the ones that I have found in the nurseries. But they all do the same thing. There's a little gauge up here, and you poke this into the soil, and it tells you how much moisture is in the soil. This one happens to be calibrated so that a medium reading of, I guess, 4 or 5 in this case, is going to be optimal, and higher than that will be overly wet and lower than that will be overly dry. So let's take a look and see what actually happens when we check the soil moisture, and then let's talk about how that will help you to manage water. So I'm just going to do a very simple thing here. I haven't watered in almost a week. And so what you'll find, sometimes it's hard to push in. That's at 4. 4 is pretty good. And what that tells me is that even though we've got a heat wave coming up, I really don't need to water. Look at the plants. The plants are fine. They don't show any signs of drought stress, which is another very important way to learn how to manage water. And combining that with the reading that I've gotten off the moisture meter tells me that I can go back inside and relax, because these plants are going to do fine for at least another few days. Now, if you don't want to invest in a water meter, a trowel will do the same thing. And you just want to dig down in there and see what's going on. It's a little bit less accurate because, unless the soil's really wet, you don't really know if there's adequate soil moisture, and that's where the moisture meter comes in. But there's nothing wrong with using a trowel to dig up a little bit of soil here and there. You can take a little sample, and it'll be, now this is obviously fairly dry, but I can feel the moisture in that. There's plenty of moisture there. And I might want to water in a couple days. I'll certainly want to check it. It's supposed to be pretty hot this afternoon. I'll probably come out and check it again tomorrow and see what's going on. And we might find that it's time to water at that point. It's been hot, it's been windy, the humidity's been low, and those things all drive water consumption. And so the other thing, of course, is watching the weather and watching for those signs. But the main point I want to make is it's really good to have one of these, because this is hard science here and really tells you a lot. And I've really been surprised to find that I've been overwatering, and I've been doing this for almost 50 years, and I still have things to learn. Let's go check a few other places and see what's going on there.
Okay.
All right, so I do have a small lawn and I do water it. It's 300 square feet, and if I manage the water correctly, it's really not that much water. And the irony of lawns in our area is if you let them go brown, which a lot of people do in the summer, then you can't use it just when you want to, and you have a beautiful green lawn when it's raining, which never made sense to me. So my philosophy is either don't have a lawn, which is perfectly fine, or use a low water use type grass or sedge or something, an alternative lawn, if you will, and go ahead and water it when you need to. And keep it small, just what you use. 300 square feet is not much lawn, and it doesn't require much water. Now, this looks pretty good right now, so I would anticipate that we'll have a pretty high level of soil moisture. And I have this on a controller, and it comes on 2 or 3 times a week. And I've got low flow, low precipitation heads around the perimeter. Let's just poke this baby in here and see what we get. But if you look there, that's at 7 point something. And so that's pretty good. That's really good. This does not need watering right now. Let's take a look a little further out in the lawn, and you'll see over there it looks kind of dry. And sometimes it does dry out more quickly because all the surrounding trees are sending roots into this area. And of course, particularly on a hot day, the transpiration through those trees is taking the water that the lawn would normally need. Plus it's hot and sunny here, and it's shadier over in this side of the lawn. So it's almost like having 2 lawns. And if I look at that, I say, well, it's not quite as green. Maybe it's dry. Let's go find out. So this is what I would say, if you looked at the surface, you'd say, gee, I better water this area. And I used to do that. Take a look. Eight. So, do we need to water? Absolutely not. Why does the lawn look hungry? It's probably a lack of nutrients over here. Again, the trees are pulling all the nitrogen out of the soil, and the lawn is suffering for it. So there's a competitive situation here, much more so than the other end of the lawn, which looks a lot greener. But it is not a watering problem, and most people would say, that's dry over there. It's out in the sun, I better water. That is the value of these. Actually knowing when to water based on what's going on in the soil is a big eye-opener for most people. And this investment will pay off very quickly in water savings. Take a look at your water bill, see what you're paying now, start using one of these, and notice the difference. It's to your advantage to do something a little more rational, I guess you'd say, than just looking around for dry spots and randomly watering them down. So containers are a special case because the soils are lighter, things are in pots, they don't hold much soil, and you have to water a lot. In fact, in a hot period, you really should water your containers pretty much every day. They dry out fast and you can lose a lot of plants. I haven't watered these for a couple days, and with the heat coming up, I might need to. Let's use the meter to find out. Take a look at that. Should I water?
I think so.
Let's check a couple more because it can vary. That's a little better. But you can see what we just learned is I better water these before the heat sets in later this afternoon. By the way, ideally you want to water in the mornings, but if something is really needing water, just water it. The other thing is sun versus shade. These plants are in full sun. They're getting sun from fairly early in the morning until later in the day when the sun goes down behind the trees. So probably this time of year, about 8-9 hours of sunshine. That's a lot, and that's creating a lot of evapotranspiration, which is a fancy word for water use, and so they need watering a lot. Now if we turn around and look over here, these plants are only going to get afternoon sun, and they may be a little wetter. Let's find out. They're up around 4. I would still water because this soil will dry out very, very quickly. So it's time to get out the hose. So I want to talk to you about one more thing, and that's mulch. Mulch is super important for so many reasons. We could go on and on about mulch. One of its benefits is that it really conserves water because it blankets the soil and holds that water down in the soil so that you don't have evaporative losses off the surface. And it makes a huge, huge difference. Once upon a time I had a sandy soil and I grew some spinach in it. It was wilting every day, and I covered it with mulch, and I immediately went to watering every 7th day. No other changes. So it can be very, very dramatic. This is a typical mulch. I like to use wood chips rather than bark because it decomposes and it adds life to the soil, and it's actually much better for the soil health than that bark that everybody likes. And I think this is still reasonably attractive. And I've gone down, some of this is pretty deep. You can see I went down here 4 inches or more, and that really makes a difference in terms of water use, but also in terms of keeping the weeds down. And it's not too much to go 4 or 5 or even 6 inches, as long as you don't bury the base of your woody plants, trees and shrubs, in mulch. You don't want to do that. But the rest of the area, it works fine to have a fairly deep mulch. Most people put mulch on too thinly. The mulch will not only soak up water, it will also repel water in some cases, depending on the type of mulch. And so, yes, you do want to take that into consideration if you're overhead watering. Of course, if you have a drip system, this area has a drip system underneath it. It's drip on a grid, we call it, which is an emitter every 12 inches everywhere in the entire bed, so that when it comes on, it's like rainfall. There's so much water going underground that it's quite an even, consistent watering. But it's under the mulch, so you don't have to worry about going through the mulch. It's true that if you put water on overhead, you can stand here for quite a while and then let it soak in and come back and the soil is still dry. And so you need to, again, as with everything in gardening, you need to understand what you're doing, check your results, and if you're overhead watering with mulch, do a little test and see how long it actually takes. If you are hand watering, it usually takes a lot longer than you're willing to stand there, and that's why an irrigation system is better. On the other hand, if you have the patience and if you have a good high volume hose system, then actually they have found that watering by hand saves water over an automatic irrigation system in many cases. If you do it correctly, it's fine. It's actually better. So it all depends.